I don't know about you, but I still find it really strange to see before. Now obviously, Marvel is just one in a long line of pop culture icons that have been swallowed up by Disney over the years, but it's also one of the more unique examples. Mainly because before they were Disney or part of a cinematic universe, there was a ton of movies and TV made featuring Marvel Comics characters, stretching all the way back to the 1940s. And if the 1960s was the decade of Marvel heroes appearing on TV in animated form, it was the 1970s that blew the door open for these characters to appear in living rooms, finally in live action. With both Hulk and Spider-Man leading the way to a new era of pop culture stardom for Marvel, it wasn't if, but when, and who would be chosen next to make the leap from comics to the small screen. Pretty sure the title of this video gives it all away. So with Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness hitting theaters, it seems like as good a time as any to revisit the Sorcerer Supreme in his first solo outing. After finding massive success in 1977 on television for both The Incredible Hulk and The Amazing Spider-Man, the path forward for Marvel Comics was looking pretty clear. Pick a hero, produce a backdoor pilot and release it as a TV movie, convert that audience over into a full series. New hero, TV movie, series. And as long as all three of these components were somewhat popular enough, Marvel had an endless treasure trove of characters to pull from.
And who are you? Hate-monger.
And that's where 1978's Doctor Strange comes in, Marvel's next big launching pad starring a couple of familiar faces. Well, not Peter Hooton, the star of this thing, though, and unless you were a big fan of the original Inglourious Bastards or 1981's Fantasies with Bo Derek, he's probably not too familiar. He is sporting a pretty killer stash, though, so there's that. Would Marvel's successful streak continue? Would Doctor Strange become the next big thing? Would an average viewer be able to stay awake through edge-of-your-seat action scenes like...
Tomorrow night, reach into the unknown with Doctor Strange.
Do you believe in evil, Doctor? You're telling me you're a sorcerer.
Don't defy me, Stephen, or I'll take my pleasure from you in another way.
John Mills is the power of good. Jessica Walter is the power of evil, and mankind's fate hangs in the balance. Peter Hooton stars in Doctor Strange, tomorrow night at 8, 7 Central and Mountain Time.
We start things off with what looks like a death metal album cover where what kind of looks like a sock puppet is tasking Morgan le Fay with destroying the Sorcerer Supreme within the next 3 days, all before he can pass on his powers to the next in line. Back on Earth, this Sorcerer Supreme is beginning to realize that his days are numbered and sends his associate Wong to locate Dr. Stephen Strange, who's not exactly the most conventional when it comes to his job.
We made a deal.
I never agreed to it. I think it's fine for doctors and nurses to fall in love.
Falling in love wasn't the question. It was making love.
Oh.
While whatever is going on here continues, Morgan and her bad self lands in New York, uses her powers to take over some random stranger who quickly catches up with Sorcerer Supreme and goes about taking care of business.
Oh no. Get an ambulance, please! Ambulance!
Is he dead?
Surprise, surprise, it doesn't really work.
Is he getting up? Get an ambulance.
Hey, buddy, I'm sorry. You all right? What happened to the girl? Did you see a girl? Hey, buddy, you sure you're all right?
Just another day on the streets of New York, I guess. Morgan bails out on the stranger, who continues to be haunted by Morgan and a very 70s made-for-TV soundtrack. After one particularly bad episode, the stranger ends up in the emergency room, where she runs into a couldn't-be-chilling-out any harder Doctor Strange.
Yeah. Doctor, I think you better get down to ER.
Doesn't seem to be a blow to the head. Do you know what happened to you?
A woman pushed him over a railing in front of a car.
Can you feel this?
Damn. 70s were a different time, man. So now, we're about a third of the way through a movie titled Doctor Strange, and really, there's been a whole lot more focus on Morgan and the Stranger than there has been on Doctor Strange. You know, the main character that was supposed to have an entire TV series built around him. Not Doctor Strange. I mean, let's just compare this to the made-for-TV movies that launched Hulk and Spider-Man. These were also both origin stories that waste very little time getting into what exactly they're trying to push with the main character. Here, there's just a lot of time spent dragging out the least interesting parts of this story.
Doc, I got the ulcers again. And I've been drinking milk like they told me to.
What else have you been drinking?
Not a drop.
Mrs. Sullivan?
Oh, well, I gotta have a little now and then. Just a little.
Of course, it also doesn't help that. Anyway, Sorcerer Supreme ends up also traveling down to the hospital to introduce himself to Strange, and also give him some important information about the Stranger, who we learn is named Clea.
What can you tell me about her?
What can you tell me about her?
Apparently there's a psychic bond between all of them, and the only way to cure these visions is through some kind of mind meld that also introduces Doctor Strange to the true extent of his supernatural powers.
To rescue Clea would expose me to an enemy who would certainly destroy me. But I can work through you to save her.
What are these powers at your command?
Alchemy, sorcery, magic, or science.
You're telling me you're a sorcerer.
It also introduces us to some of the wildest scenes that you'll find from Marvel TV at the time, and oh boy is it pure 1970s cheese.
When does it begin?
Now.
But this is kind of what I want in a 1970s adaptation of Doctor Strange, just a pure psychedelic trip. Some of the elements are here. We've got the soundtrack, the porn stash, a few sporadic special effects, which is all fine, but just not enough. I mean, I'm looking for Alejandro Jodorowsky levels of weirdness in my Doctor Strange. Too niche? So now with Clea freed from Morgan's spell, Sorcerer Supreme tells Strange that he's the next in line. Who could not be more excited?
I don't know what you did to me last night. I don't want to know. It doesn't matter. I don't want anything more to do with it.
But after Sorcerer Supreme gets blasted apart by Morgan, she then brings Doctor Strange into a dimension known as a basement covered in paper mache, where she then tries to seduce him in the most convincing way possible.
Am I pleasing to you?
You're beautiful.
What is it you most desire? Well?
At least he gets a pretty bitchin' costume out of it. Things get a little less sexy though when Strange refuses to take off his protective ring, so Morgan summons the powers of what looks like a Spirit Halloween superstore.
In the name of Royal, Scourge of Demons, I command you, release me!
I guess he learns all of this superhero stuff quickly, and with what can only be described as the definition of an anticlimactic encounter, Morgan is defeated, loses the power of her youth, and is stuck somewhere, which leaves Doctor Strange as the new soon-to-be Sorcerer Supreme, and also leaves us with the setup for a TV series that never actually happened.
You're like a child with a loaded gun. You have inherited the powers, but not the knowledge or the wisdom that must accompany them. Yet.
So that's the 1970s Doctor Strange TV movie, which turns out to be anything but strange. The whole thing is pretty low-level stakes, and even the action scenes that are here just aren't all that exciting. Which is surprising given that this was supposed to be followed up with a TV series, so you'd think that the writers would build in enough interesting hooks so that an audience would want more of these characters, or story, or world. Given the source material, you're open for a little more.
Bells are off.
Hail, Morgan.
Then.
I'll be ready in a minute. Can I offer you something?
I'd love a hot bath.
But nah, that's just not what we're getting here. But of course, this is a 1970s TV movie with a 1970s TV budget, so it's important to keep all expectations in check. Still... helping things for this version of Doctor Strange. When the film finally did air on TV September 6, 1978, it apparently got blown out of the water by a rerun of the Roots miniseries. Even with this failure, this was far from the last time that we'd see Doctor Strange on the small screen, though it would take some time for the character to re-emerge. And now, the Sorcerer Supreme is pretty much a mainstay in the mainstream, with the Marvel Cinematic Universe not able to go more than a movie or two without Doctor Strange showing up in some form or another. As for Marvel Comics, they tried this backdoor pilot method once more in 1979 with Captain America, which, much like Doctor Strange, didn't exactly set the world on fire.
Be Captain America, Steve.
And eventually, in the 90s, the entire company went bankrupt and was never heard from again. It won't stop!